Thomas Gray had always preferred the solitude of the mountains. His cabin, nestled deep within a quiet thicket of pines, was more than just a home. It was a sanctuary. The trees, their towering trunks etched with years of history, were his companions. The river that wound its way through the valley was his music, its waters a constant melody in the background of his life. The animals, deer, foxes, the occasional bear, were his only visitors, and even they, he had learned, preferred to keep their distance. Thomas had no need for human company. The mountain was all he ever needed. His days followed a slow, steady rhythm. By morning, he fished along the riverbanks, his line dipping and dancing with the current, while the sun cast its golden light over the rocky outcroppings. In the afternoon, he wandered the forest trails, sometimes marking a new route, other times simply following where the earth led him. In the evening, as the sun set behind the peaks, he sat in front of his fireplace, reading books that he had accumulated over the years, each one a small portal to a world far removed from the quiet, secluded one he had built for himself. There was peace in the monotony, and in that peace, he had found contentment. But there had been times, long ago, when that solitude had been different. It had been a space shared with another soul, a woman named Elizabeth, whose laughter had filled the cabin with warmth. They had fallen in love amidst the simplicity of the mountains, finding in each other something that neither had expected. She had loved the wilds of nature, the quiet rivers, and the endless skies, but her heart had been drawn to the city, to the life of opportunity and noise that Thomas had no interest in. Their love had faded like a fleeting season, and with it, Elizabeth had left. Thomas had never been able to follow her, never able to leave the land he had come to love. And so, he had remained in the mountains, alone with his memories, with only the wolves, the deer, and the changing seasons to keep him company. It had been years since he had last seen her, but sometimes, late at night when the fire flickered low and the wind howled through the cracks in the walls, Thomas would still feel the pang of her absence. The loneliness would creep in, not as a constant presence, but as a shadow that brushed against his every thought. He had learned to live with it, to carry on with the rhythm of the mountains, but at times, the ache of solitude still lingered, like the fading echoes of a song. On one crisp autumn evening, with the sun dipping low and casting long shadows across the earth, Thomas decided to take one of his rare walks through the forest. The air was sharp, the smell of pine and earth hanging heavy in the cool breeze. It was one of those rare, still moments in the wilderness when everything seemed to hold its breath. The trees stood silent, their leaves rustling softly as he walked along the winding path. The world felt suspended in time, as though nature itself was waiting for something to break the stillness. Thomas's thoughts wandered, as they often did when he walked the trails. He thought of Elizabeth, of what might have been, of the life they might have shared if the mountains had not held him so tightly. But as he walked deeper into the woods, his thoughts drifted from the past and turned inward, to the peace he had found in his solitude. Then, a sound broke the quiet. It was faint, barely a whisper in the wind, but it was there, something weak, pained, and almost muffled. His heart skipped a beat, and his senses sharpened. He stopped, listening intently. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, the sound came. Again, a soft whine, a low growl. Something was in pain. Thomas moved cautiously toward the noise, his feet light on the forest floor, the crisp leaves crunching beneath his boots. Through the thicket, he saw a shape. A wolf, lying on the ground, its body contorted with pain. Its leg was twisted at an unnatural angle, blood staining the soft fur around its paw. For a moment, Thomas froze, his mind reeling. A wolf, injured and vulnerable, was a rare sight in these parts. The wild creatures of the forest, strong and untamed, usually kept their distance from humans. But this wolf, was different. Its eyes met Thomas's, and in them, he saw something he had not expected, not the ferocity of the wild, but a raw, vulnerable fear. The wolf, a creature known for its strength and independence, was now helpless, in need of help. Thomas hesitated. His heart raced, unsure of what to do. Wolves were not animals that easily accepted human intervention, and even a wounded wolf could be dangerous. But as he stood there, watching the creature struggle, he realized that he could not leave it to suffer. There was no question. He had to help. Cautiously, he approached, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. The wolf growled weakly, showing its teeth, but there was no real aggression in the sound. It was a warning, a last defense, but the fear in its eyes was unmistakable. Thomas spoke softly, his voice low and gentle. "Easy now. I'm not going to hurt you." Slowly, he knelt beside the wolf, his hands trembling slightly as he examined the injury. The leg was badly broken, but it wasn't beyond hope. He ripped a strip of fabric from his shirt and fashioned a makeshift bandage, trying to stop the bleeding. The wolf flinched, its body trembling with pain, but it didn't fight. It seemed to understand that Thomas was trying to help. "Hang on," Thomas murmured, more to himself than to the wolf. "I won't leave you." With great care, he lifted the wolf into his arms, cradling it as best as he could. The animal's weight was heavy, and its breathing was shallow, but it remained quiet, as though it trusted him. Thomas made his way back to the truck, each step measured and careful. The forest seemed even quieter now, the air thick with the weight of the moment. He knew he had to get the wolf to town, to a veterinary clinic, but the drive seemed impossibly long. The truck bounced along the rough road, the headlights cutting through the darkness. Thomas glanced back at the wolf every so often, checking on it, worrying. Its eyes were closed, its breathing faint but steady. Thomas could only hope that it would make it through the night. By the time he reached the clinic, Dr. Sarah Donovan, the town's veterinarian, was waiting for him. She had seen Thomas only a handful of times in all the years he had lived in the area, and always under similar circumstances: quiet, isolated, and reserved. Seeing him at the clinic was rare, and the sight of the wolf in his arms only deepened her concern. "What happened?" she asked, her voice filled with surprising concern. "It's hurt badly," Thomas replied, his voice tight with urgency. "Can you help it?" Dr. Donovan's face softened with understanding, and without another word, she took the wolf from Thomas's arms, moving quickly to get it inside. The wolf was trembling. Its breathing labored, but the vet's experience shone through. She immediately began working to assess the injuries, cleaning the wounds, and setting the broken leg. Thomas watched, his heart in his throat, but he couldn't bring himself to leave. He sat in a chair beside the wolf, his hands clasped tightly together. He spoke to the wolf in soft tones, reassuring it, even though he wasn't sure if the creature could understand. Dr. Donovan worked with practiced efficiency, her hands moving with purpose. After a long while, she turned to Thomas. "It's going to be a long recovery," she said, her voice serious but not without hope. "But with rest, it can heal." A heavy weight lifted from Thomas's chest. He wasn't sure what had driven him to help the wolf. Some strange instinct, a deep-rooted sense of compassion, but in that moment, he knew that he had made the right choice. Over the next few weeks, Thomas visited the clinic every day. He sat by Ash's side, his name now given to the wolf, as it healed. Dr. Donovan was kind, offering her expertise, but Thomas could see that the wolf needed more than just medical care. It needed time, attention, and the kind of quiet comfort that only a human companion could offer. And so, Thomas found himself talking to Ash, telling him stories of his past, of the love he had lost, of the life he had chosen in the mountains. He spoke to the wolf as if it were a friend, an unexpected listener who would never judge. Slowly, Ash began to respond to him, his wary eyes softening, his body growing stronger. When the time came to take Ash back to the cabin, it was a quiet, almost solemn moment. The world outside was blanketed in snow, the first signs of winter creeping into the land. Thomas wasn't sure how the wolf would fare in the wild again, but he knew that he couldn't keep Ash in the clinic any longer. The wolf had healed enough. It was time for both of them to move on, to embrace what the future held. At the cabin, the first few days were filled with uncertainty. Ash was unsure of his new surroundings, his eyes darting nervously as he adjusted to the barn Thomas had set up for him. But slowly, over time, they both found a new rhythm. Ash became more comfortable with his new home, and Thomas, too, found solace in the company of the wolf. Winter deepened, the snow falling heavily, covering the earth in a blanket of white. Thomas and Ash spent hours walking through the forest, their steps light in the snow, the world around them silent and still. Together, they ventured into the wilderness, each of them learning to trust the other more. With each passing day, the wolf's movements were more graceful, his broken leg fully healed, and Thomas couldn't help but marvel at the change. The wolf had become more than just a wounded creature. It had become a companion, a friend, and in the company of the animal, Thomas began to heal too. The loneliness that had once clung to his every step began to fade. The ache that had lived in his heart for so long, the loss of love and connection, no longer felt as heavy. In the quiet, in the stillness of the mountains, Thomas had found something he had never expected, a bond with a creature that, like him, had known pain and loss, but had also known healing and hope. As spring began to melt the snow and the first signs of life returned to the forest, Thomas knew that something had changed, not just in the world around him, but within himself. He had not only healed Ash, but in caring for the wolf, he had healed parts of himself. Together, they walked the trails, side by side, companions in a world that was both wild and beautiful. And so, under the vast sky, amidst the mountains and the quiet forests, Thomas and Ash found their new beginning, a journey that neither had expected, but one that they would walk together.